How many 80s fans do I have in the house? There you go. I feel the need. There it is. I love it. It's a tribute to the 80s today. I have an 80s movie, and I wore my 80s pants. There you go. Man, how many of you have ever felt like that's life? That you're going along and all of a sudden you hit a patch and your life starts spinning out of control. Maybe you hit a patch and you're in a flat spin. You've got some people around you and you're just struggling and you're bailing. And then finally when you feel like you're getting ready to eject, it just hits you right in the teeth. Anybody ever felt like that? See, there's this crazy thing with church. I'll tell you, way back in the day when I first started in ministry, I had an opportunity. Pastors have awkward conversations all the time. On any given Sunday, you say about 5,000 words on a stage. And so oftentimes you could say the wrong thing, and not really mean, or it could be taken out of context. But I'd been asked to speak. We were at a children's ranch, and we were doing this thing for like a fundraiser type deal. And we were talking about the ranch. And I went up there, and it was this little church. And right before I went up on stage, somebody slipped me a note, and it was an announcement they wanted me to make. And there was a lady who apparently had gone to their church, and she was pregnant, and she was going into labor. And so I took the note, and this wasn't like, hey, you've got 40 people that are pregnant at the time. This was a pretty small church. It was like one pregnant lady. It was a big deal that they were going to grow the church, kind of thing. And so I got on stage, and I basically read the note. I said, hey, we want to pray for her, and I said her name. Her water broke. She got rushed to the hospital. She's in labor. And I didn't think anything about it. I just moved right along. And see, there's something as a pastor that you guys, I'll give you a little behind the scenes, that oftentimes there's people in church and their spiritual gift is criticizing your sermons. And so what they'll do is they'll wait for you to get out of the message, and they'll come and they'll break down your message for you in 2 minutes before everybody lets out. And one of my favorite one of these, there was a guy in Texas at the church we were at, man. He'd be the first one out, and he would tell me everything I said wrong and how I should have said it different. And that particular Sunday, I was actually preaching on parenting, which I don't do a lot because I truly believe that the only experts in parenting are those who don't have kids that think they're experts. The rest of us are just trying to figure it out. But truth is, I was teaching on parenting, and I was actually talking about, because one of the questions I get all the time is, do you believe in spanking or corporal punishment or whatever it was? And I was giving this example about how you drive to church or you're on a road trip, and you're like, hey, don't make me pull the car over, and then they keep it up, and you're kind of doing the one-hand swat. This is probably unspiritual, but you're trying to do that. And then there's this safe space kind of right between that the kids know about. Like, if I could just lean back, you can't get to them. And so I was explaining that. And I'm standing out in the lobby, and this older gentleman, probably 75, 80 years old, busted out the door. And he's walking, and he's got a purpose. And in my brain, I'm like, because you can spot them a mile away. They're coming. And I'm like, oh, no, here it comes. And he walks up to me, and he points his finger in my face, which I'm like, I will break your finger. And he points and he goes, young man, you need some advice from an old man. And I thought, oh, here it comes. And I said, what's that? He goes, let me tell you something. When you're trying that SWAT, if you'll just tap the brake a little bit, it sends them forward. Awesome. Anyway, this lady comes up after I've given this announcement that, Cindy her water broke and she's in labor, and I didn't think anything about it. And this lady comes up to me, and she was upset. She was mad, like shaking, mad. And I'm like, man, I was talking about like abandoned, abused, trafficked kids. Like, what could I have really messed up in that, right? And she comes out, and she was like, I am so upset. I'm so mad right now. I can't even believe you would say that. I honestly had no idea. I'm like, what in the world is she talking about? And I'm like, obviously you're upset. I'm sorry if I said something. Was it theological? And she goes, you don't talk about stuff like that. And I said, well, I don't talk about what? She goes, you don't talk about water breaking. And I went, okay. I wasn't even really sure at that point what that really was. Like, we hadn't even and I'm like, I am so sorry. So I actually really thought I had offended her. So this wasn't even my church. I went to the hospital, and I was talking to the lady who was pregnant, and I already had the baby, and I walked in. I was like, hey, I just want to tell you, I was guest speaking at your church. I am so sorry. I was handed a note, and I said your water broke, and you were in labor, and your church is praying for you, but maybe that was too much information. She said, don't worry about it. She goes, I appreciate that. I appreciate it. And then I was confused. I'm like, on one hand, I've got this lady over here who's just livid with me because I was talking about somebody in labor. And then I've got the lady who's actually in labor. She's like, no, don't worry about it. As I've grown in ministry, what I figured out from that situation is this, is that it's a church culture thing. That for years and years and years, and I grew up in church, but for years the church culture has been, if it's messy, you don't talk about it. Like we want to get up, maybe give some good Old Testament history lessons, but if it's messy, don't talk about it. And that's what was going on with this situation, is we were talking about something that might not have been like, I don't know, politically correct, culturally correct, something like that. But here's the deal. Church culture says you don't talk about things like that. You don't talk about issues that you may have. You don't talk about messiness. And I don't know whether you're watching from online from a different country or a different state or where you came from this morning. But one of the goals of our church is to hit the messy topics, because by and large, that's what people are truly dealing with, is messiness. Life is messy. But this is also what I know. Moving back into the Southeast, this is what I know about Southeastern kind of churches, that most people, not everybody, I know not anybody in this room, but most of the people that go to church down the street, most people, or a lot of people, I won't even say most, a lot of people go to church just to make an appearance. They do. They go to church because that's what you do in Alabama. You want to rob a bank in Alabama, do it on Sunday. Everybody's sitting in the church, right? We've all heard that line. People go to church. People do church. I've lived on the West Coast. I've lived on the East Coast. I've lived in the Midwest. It's not this way in a lot of places. But in the South, people go to church. But a lot of times they just go because their mom and dad go. They just go because it's a social club. They go because they need to be seen. It's going to help their business. They need to appear to be conservative, or they need to appear to be the church person. We show up on Sundays and we just make an appearance. And I call this kind of checklist Christianity. We walk in, check, I'm here, made it to church. Check, I made it to Wednesday night. You know what? I stood up, I sang some songs. Maybe didn't sing some songs, I kind of stood there, but I stood up. That's got to count for something. Check, right? Throw a couple of dollars in the plate, relieve some guilt. You know, I've got a decal on my truck that tells what church I go to. And that's what we do. We do church. And we don't really want to talk about messy things. We don't really want to talk about the things that are going on in our life, because when you start stepping on toes, well, we don't need people to know that we struggle, right? We put on this false kind of mask. We put on this false kind of presentation. But see, that's never what church was actually built for. If you look back throughout Scripture, church in the early church was built for a couple of reasons. One, it was built for celebration. It's all about celebrating our risen Savior, Jesus Christ, who came from heaven onto earth. He died and he rose from the dead 3 days later. Great. It's celebrating him. It's celebrating the fact that he bridged the gap and gives us a chance at eternity. We're getting ready to really pump up the celebration here in a few weeks on Easter. But church every week should be a celebration of the guy that we follow. And I just want to say, and I say it a lot, if you're in here and you don't do the Jesus thing and you don't do the God thing, man, you are so welcome to be here. You are so welcome to be here. We are just impressed that you're taking those steps. Take the time you need. We'll answer any questions we have. But if you are a Jesus follower and you claim that, church ought to be a celebration. And it always amazes me when we walk into church and it feels more like a funeral than a celebration. Church ought to be celebrating the one who came that gave us a bridge so that we can spend eternity with God. Another reason church is built and was placed on this earth is for community. I love this about this church. Is ever since I've gotten here, one of the things that I love about TWCC is this. It is one big community. I love walking in on Wednesday nights. I do. I love watching people sitting around tables. I love walking in and seeing people on Sunday morning high-fiving. I told a guest the other day, I was like, hey, I bet you can't make it into our doors without being greeted at least 3 times. I believe that. I really do. And it's amazing. And he bet me that I was wrong. And he's wrong. And he's sitting right here in the second row. This is my friend Matt and Clarissa. They came from Texas to visit us over spring break. He was our children's pastor there. But I've been talking about y'all, and I'm talking about how much with community that you guys have. And that's what church is all about. It's about doing life together. And here's the thing about family. I don't know about your family, but most families, they hit tough patches. They hit flat spins. Sometimes families can be absolutely out of control. But we're supposed to, as a church, we're called to be, it's in Scripture all throughout, we are called to be a beacon of hope that people far from God can come to meet God. We're called as a church to open our doors wide open and to be you know why we have steeples on churches? It's for when people are in distress, they can look and they see the steeple and they know that it's a place of safety. It's a place of hope. Our church is supposed to be a place where we can come in and talk about real things and where we can move forward in life together in community as families. Let me tell you something. You're going to struggle with your kids. You're going to struggle at some point. You're going to hit a bump in the road in your marriage. You're going to hit a bump in the road in your career. You're going to have things in your life that will actually make you feel like you're in a flat spin and that life is out of control. And here's why we need a place like this. Because we all need grace. We all need grace that only comes through Christ. And here's how I know this, because the guy standing on the stage needs grace. Look, we've all messed up. I messed up this week. I mess up half the time I'm on Highway 82. Because 82 to 69, that is the dumbest intersection, right? So you got this little dotted line with like 8 people trying to turn. And I'm going to tell you something. There's some people in this town that don't know that you're supposed to stay on one side of that dotted line. And I was driving the other day, and it's like 2 days ago, and I'm in a hurry, right? Because the rest of the world should get out of my way when I'm in a hurry, because my lack of time management is obviously your problem. And so I go to turn, and this lady is in the other lane, and she's turning, and she kept turning, and she kept going, and I'm like, dude, I will flatten you. And then I got to thinking, I better not do that, because even though I have a Highland sticker for those moments, some of y'all just now catching that. Is that honestly, I got frustrated. I got upset. I got frustrated at my kids. I got frustrated at my wife. Like, we all need grace. We all mess up. We all mess up, and we need a place where we could come, that we could talk about real issues. It's about dealing with our issues. It's all about moving one step closer to Christ. It's a training ground for when we get to heaven and get to spend eternity with Jesus. And so here at TWCC, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to talk about tough subjects. And let's be real. Church culture says you should put on this false front. You should walk in and you got to dress the part. And you got to look the part. And you better have it all together. And it's about the clothes you wear. It's more like a social country club. And it's all about the cliches that you know and the Christianese that you can spew. Right? Anybody been to churches like that? Yeah, we have. But that's not what it's supposed to look like. What I wear to church is probably the most scrutinized thing in the world. What I hear more about is what people wear to church. And frankly, it's not biblical. It don't matter. If you got a friend that'll walk in here on Easter Sunday and all they want to wear is shorts, wear shorts. Wear flip-flops. Wear a ball cap. And I know that's going to jack with some of y'all. But I'm going to tell you something. It's not about tradition. It's about Jesus Christ. And if we can open our doors and allow people in with their junk the same way, I might add, that we were allowed in with our junk, man, how awesome that would be to change a community. Be authentic. Be yourself. I mean, truthfully, if I pastored in the Northwest, I'd wear skinny jeans, Converse, I'd have a man bun, and I'd listen to Michael Bublé in the bubble bath. But I don't pastor in the Northwest. And that's why. I wore skinny jeans once. They're called Wranglers. But here's the deal. Be yourself. If you dress up, you wear a suit and tie, dress up, wear a suit and tie. But be yourself. We've got to get to a place as a church where we start to take the mask off. We've got to get to the place as a church. And that's why we're going to talk about today's subject. All of that to say, today we're going to talk about a subject that you don't hear much about. And we've got to talk about real things. And it's messy. And people are messy. We have to get to a place where as a church and as individuals, we can be authentic. It's not about what you wear. It's not about how you dress. It's all about being authentic and working through our stuff. Find freedom in being yourself. Let me ask you this question. We're going to talk about depression and anxiety today. We're in week 2 of a series called Burnout. And what we're talking about is in life, most of us hit a spot. If you haven't hit it yet, there's a good chance you will, that we hit a spot where we're burnt out, where we're just exhausted, where we're frustrated constantly. Part of the burnout is actually depression and anxiety. We're going to talk about that this morning. How many of you have ever been in a room full of people? Y'all don't have to raise your hand. But how many of you have ever been in a room full of people and you felt all alone? Anybody? There's a few of you. How many of you have ever found a corner in a round room because you didn't feel like you belonged? You felt like somebody would ask you a question. You felt so inadequate that when you get around a group of people, you actually try to segregate and isolate yourself because you don't feel like you fit in. You don't feel like you're qualified. You don't feel like anybody in the room would even like you. Anybody ever felt like that? How many of you have ever had a moment where you woke up in the middle of the night thinking about the people that you think don't like you? How many of you have ever woke up in the middle of the night anxious about tomorrow to the point you can't even sleep? And you already play out the doomsday scenario of tomorrow. Anybody ever been like that? How many have ever felt so anxious, had so much anxiety or so much depression that when you woke up in the morning, rather than getting out of bed, you just pulled the covers over your head? You were so shut down emotionally and physically that you couldn't even get up. All of us at some point have had some, if not all, of these feelings. Now, whether you were able to push through or not is a different story, but all of us at some point hit a level of depression or a level of anxiety, and we live in such a fast-paced world that it's so easy to burn out and get to this point. Most of us have felt that. Everyone, I saw this thing on Facebook yesterday. It was a phenomenal quote. It said, "Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about." And it's so true. There's many of you in here this morning. You're fighting an inward battle. And nobody knows. Like, you can walk in and you can smile and you can put on the front and you can, if people look at you, they'd be like, man, they got it all together. But deep down inside, you are torn up inside. And the sad part is guys like me get on a stage like this, and I've heard pastors say this, and they're like, you know what? If you just love Jesus more, you wouldn't be depressed. You just love Jesus more, you wouldn't be anxious, right? That's the Christian cliches. But that's not even biblical. And here's why. Let's go over some guys you may have heard of. There's a guy by the name of Moses. Numbers 11, 14, and 15. He says this, I can't carry all of these. He's talking to God. He's like, I can't do it all by myself. The load is far too heavy. Anybody felt like your day's too much? Anybody felt like the circumstances of life is too heavy on you that you just can't do it anymore? Where you're just ready to throw it and be like, I'm out. Like, it's too much. Moses, if this is how you intend to treat me, just go ahead and kill me. This is one of the heroes of the Bible. Do me a favor and spare me this misery. Think this guy was depressed? Think he had anxiety? I mean, he kind of led a nation, but he had seen God's miracle. Like, they walked through parted the sea. If this is how you're going to treat me, God, just be done with me. There's a guy by the name of Elijah. If you grew up in church, you might have heard of him. If you didn't, maybe not, but 1 Kings. So Elijah does this awesome miracle. He goes up, and he's dealing with this country, and he goes up kind of head-to-head with their priest, and they try to pray and call fire down and burn up this altar. Elijah got up there, and he was all like throwing water on the fire, and he said, God, show yourself mighty. Boom, he saw a major miracle, changed the nation. Also got some crazy queen chasing after him, wanting to kill him. But Elijah's like a prophet of God, and he's seen miracles, and I mean, he's one of the heroes of the faith. 1 Kings 19, 3-4. Elijah was afraid, fled for his life. He went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there, which, just for the record, he isolated himself. He isolated himself. When we're going through depression, when we're going through anxiety, what we often do is we isolate ourselves from the very people that we need around us the most. But then it goes on and he says, then he went alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down under a solitary broom tree, and he prayed that he might die. Okay, it wasn't like years after the miracle. This is like right after the miracle, right after he saw the biggest miracle he'd ever seen from God. He crawls up under a tree. And then he prays this: I have had enough, Lord. Take my life. I've had enough. I've had enough. Hero of the Bible. God, take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. How about Jonah? Everybody knows Jonah, right? Even if you didn't grow up in church, you heard about Jonah and the fish that ate him. Jonah, just kill me now, Lord. Just kill me now. I'd rather be dead than alive if what I predicted will not happen. Basically, Jonah's saying, hey, God, if you're not going to answer my prayer and do what I want, I'd rather be dead. I don't know if this is depression or anxiety or just pouting more. But he's upset. He's frustrated. And then there's the Apostle Paul. It's the one that kind of started the whole missionary movement. He's the one that saw God on a road and major miracles, and he was a missionary. And last week we talked about him and how it was all about perspective and how Paul was like chained up, and it's all about perspective and put the perspective in place. Paul goes, we think you ought to know, dear brothers and sisters, about the trouble we went through in the province of Asia. We were crushed and overwhelmed beyond our ability to endure, and we thought we would never live through it. We were crushed beyond our ability to endure. Sometimes life and circumstances crush us to the point where we don't feel like that we can endure. These are Bible heroes. These are some of the biggest names in the Bible that dealt with depression and frustration, and that had seen God move in bigger ways than we can even begin to imagine. And here's what I want to say this morning. If you're in here and you're burnt out and you're dealing with depression or anxiety, you're in good company. And it's not something you have to hide. It's not something you have to run from. You don't have to fake it till you make it here in church. Because the Bible is full of people who dealt with some of the same things that you're going through. And here's the amazing thing. When you see the backside of all of their stories, wow, God pulled them through. And so there is hope on the other end. I've titled this message Sticky Notes. I know it's a weird title, right? What would y'all say some of the greatest inventions ever are? You'd probably say like electricity, right? You'd probably say the car. I believe the greatest invention ever created was a sticky note. And here's why, because I am a sticky note dude. I like to write on sticky notes, and I stick them everywhere. I've gotten to the point, though, that it's so bad, I write on a sticky note, I stick it down, I don't put all the information on it, and I'll look at my sticky note and be like, I don't remember why I stuck that there. But I love sticky notes. And what sticky notes are meant in my world, I'm not a big tech guy. I'm just now figuring out all the Google Calendar stuff and all of that world. I'm a sticky note guy. And the reason I use sticky notes, I'll put them on my mirrors, I'll put them on my desk, I'll put them everywhere. And the reason I love sticky notes is because it reminds me. Because after about 3 seconds, I often forget what I was doing. And so I stick those on there to remind me. The reason I titled this message Sticky Notes is for this right here. Some of us who are battling depression or who are battling anxiety or who in the future will battle depression or anxiety, you need some sticky notes to remind you of how amazing God is. There's 4 reasons we end up in depression and anxiety and burnout. The first reason is an unrealistic pace. If you've got your notes, write it down. We live in the most fast-paced society ever, and it is just speeding up. Used to, it was 30-second abs. Then it went to 8-second abs. Now it's like 10-second abs. I'm like, I like that one. I do a sit-up every day, half in the morning, half when I go to bed at night. But here's the deal. We live in such a fast pace. I call it a microwave society. We live in a world where even like Twitter, it's only this many characters. Or Facebook, it's like we don't even have time to type now. We need videos. We live in a world where if you call somebody, the expectation is that they pick up the phone immediately or they call you back immediately. How many of y'all remember the busy signal? I think that was the second greatest invention ever made. To be honest with you, I'd love to have that again, unless I'm calling you. And then it's frustrating because I'm in a hurry. I'm in a hurry. And my time's important. And I'm always in a hurry. I'm in a hurry everywhere I go. It doesn't matter if I'm early. I'm in a hurry. The pace of life that we set, if you're a parent in here, the pace of life that you set with the new world of traveling sports, and we revolve our entire home around all of our children, and that's just not the way the Bible meant it, because you're going to raise up a child in the way they should go. When they get old, they won't depart from it. But there's going to come a day when hopefully they actually move out and go have their own family, and you have to reconnect with the person that you don't even know anymore. Because you spent an entire 18, 19, 20 years running at such a fast pace, going in different directions. Or you're running at a job as hard as you can, and you're working 20 out of 24 hours a day to the point where you're making a ton of money, but you can't even enjoy it because you're in a hurry to get more and to do more. But in America, we live in a pace that says, don't sit still because you're lazy. Or don't sit still. You need to be in a hurry. Everything is speed. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And oftentimes it's even hurry up and wait. But we're in a hurry. Ask anybody. They're always in a hurry. The second reason is unrealistic expectations of others. My definition of frustration is an unmet expectation. We have expectations every day, all day. From the time you wake up until the time you go to bed, you have 1,000 expectations that either come true or they don't come true. When you wake up in the morning and you go over to your light switch, you go to flip the light switch, your expectation is that lights will come on. And when it doesn't, you get frustrated. The expectation is when you turn on a faucet, that the water will come on. And when it doesn't, you get frustrated. Your expectation is that when you do something well at work, that your boss will look at you and say, good job. And when he doesn't, you get frustrated. Your expectation is that your spouse is always going to be nice to you and do everything you ask them to do. How's that working for you? Anybody who's been married longer than a minute? It's true. It leads to frustration. Frustrations are unmet expectations. You can get so frustrated so quick. And the reality is it isn't them, it's actually you who's frustrated. I hear this all the time. Well, if they would change, or if they would this, or if they would do that. And the truth is that we are actually, by the time we're getting frustrated about all this kind of stuff, the truth is we're already in a season of burnout. Because we're frustrated over unmet and unrealistic view. Admit it or not, that life ought to be bubble gum, rainbows, and unicorns. Like life should just be good, and everybody ought to get along, and life should be happy, and everybody should love me as long as I'm trying, and I love everybody else, and life should just has no hassles, and then you do the church thing, and you accept Christ, and you assume everything from the day that you accepted Christ, all the stuff in the past, it doesn't actually follow you into the future because you've been given a weird sales pitch that says, everything just goes away, and the truth is that the Bible actually talks about that everything actually gets harder. And the enemy's going to come at you harder because now you have influence, now you have impact. But we have this unrealistic expectation of life. I want to tell you, one of my biggest frustrations and expectations of life, how many of y'all have smoke alarms in the house? The only time a smoke alarm battery goes out is at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's true. And I'll be laying in bed and you hear chirp. It's the worst sound in the world. Chirp. And then you got to go on an Easter hunt to find out which one it is. And it only happens about every minute. And so you stand under it and you listen. Chirp. And it came from there. So you walk over, you stand under, you listen. Chirp. I'm like, God, I work for you. Just point out which one it is. And then my buddy actually told me that it wasn't even the battery, that some of these smoke detectors, like you plug them in now and the whole detector can go out. And I figured out how to actually remove them. And so when we were getting ready to sell our house in Texas, I had a drawer full of smoke detectors. It's only by God's grace the house didn't burn down because I got 8 of them sitting in a drawer. But it took, because I was in a season of burnout. And just that little chirping noise, the one thing that could actually save our lives, could save our kids' lives, I didn't look at it like that. I got mad. I got mad at the smoke detector. I got mad at my wife who was laying there still sleeping. I got mad at God because somehow He could fix this. It's irrational. But that's us. And as dumb as a smoke detector sounds, that's us with life. Is we have an unrealistic of expectation of life. Things are going to happen. Things are going to happen, like cars are going to break down, buses are going to be late. Things happen, but we have this unrealistic expectation that everything's going to go right. And then the final one, which is, man, this is so prevalent in today's culture of why we end up depressed and frustrated and burnt out, is there's an unrealistic desire to be liked by others. It's true. It's true. We live in a social media world that it's all about how many people like you, how many people friend you, how many. Like I remember back in the day, your friends were the ones that lived in your neighborhood because it's the ones you could ride your bicycle to their house. And you didn't worry about all the rest. But we live in a social media world where we're looking at everybody else's highlight clip and we're comparing it to our real life. And we'll have people that sit up all night and they worry about, well, they didn't like my post. And oh my goodness, if you get defriended, it sends people into depression. And here's the deal. It's somebody you ain't talked to in 24 years. You didn't really like them in high school. But they defriend you, and all of a sudden in your brain it's like, man, they don't even like me. But we have this expectation that everybody's going to like us, and if they don't, then it sends us into a tailspin, and it's because we put our worth in the hands of other people as opposed to our worth in the Creator who created us. And because of that, it'll send us into depression or anxiety. I want to read a passage. If you got your Bible this morning, we're going to be in Daniel chapter 3. There's 3 guys. So these guys, the Israelites, have they're Hebrew boys, and they've been taken over by the Babylonians, and they're in captivity. And it's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're 3 dudes. And there was this king who had decreed that they had built this crazy statue, and when the music started, you were supposed to bow down to it. And the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were talking about how they weren't going to bow down to a God that wasn't the God, that wasn't the God. So they weren't going to bow down to the king. They weren't going to bow down to the idol. They weren't going to bow down to the mosque. They weren't going to bow down to anything but their God. And so this king got all jacked up and angry, and his people were running and tattling to him. So they did it the first time. They played the music, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were standing up with a whole group of people that were all kneeling. It's kind of obvious. And so they went and tattled on him, and the king got furious. He's like, well, I told you, and if you don't, I'm going to throw you into a fire. And I'm going to crank it up. We talked a little bit about this last week. And I'm going to crank it up, and that's where we pick up in the story. It says, that decree also states that those who refuse to obey must be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom you have put in charge of a province in Babylon. They pay no attention to you. They refuse to serve your gods, and they do not worship the gold statue you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar flew into rage. He ordered that they be brought before him. When they were brought in, the king said to him, is it true that you refuse to serve my gods or to worship the gold statue I've set up? I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the statue I've made when you hear the sound of the musical instruments. If you refuse, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. I want to stop right there for a second. How many know that brought on some anxiety? Like we come in and we sit in our cushioned seats, and our biggest complaint is if the AC is not the temperature that we have. These guys were like, hey, if you don't bow down to me and not your God, I'm not just going to kill you, I'm going to burn you alive. Now, I can think of a lot of ways to die. That's not one I want. I don't really want any of them, but that one sounds brutally painful. Anxiety. And then it goes on to say, and then they say this. Nope. He says, but if you refuse, you'll be thrown into a blazing furnace. And then I like this. And then what God will be able to rescue you from my power? That's a smart move. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able. The God who we serve is able to save us. And then one of the most amazing sentences in the Bible of faith is this next one. God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, wow. I know that he can, but even if he doesn't, our faith is going to see us through. I know that He can, but even if He doesn't, we want to make it clear to you that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you've set up. I know that He can, but even if He doesn't. You want to talk about faith. I know that He can, but hey, you know what? I'll pray that He spares us, but even if He doesn't, we're going to see the bigger picture in this. And we're not going to bow down because we serve an almighty God that knows the picture more than we do. You see, there's a few things that when we're battling depression and we're battling anxiety that we need to remember. Here's your sticky note number 1. You may want to put it on your mirror. That God is holy and God is good. God is holy and God is good. The character of God never changes. Our circumstances change all the time, but the character of God never changes. The definition of holy is perfect. When you hear about the angels that they're singing about them, and here's the crazy thing. They say, holy, holy, holy. God, you are glorious. You are perfect. You are worthy of our worship. And here's the argument with this. Well, if God is so good, why did this happen to me? If God is so good, why do bad things happen to good people? And I'm not going to begin to speak for God. I'm not going to begin to try to get into that theological debate with you. But here's what I know. The reason most of us struggle with that is because God isn't doing what we asked Him to do. See, it looks something like this, like if you've got a parent or you've got a child or you've got somebody that's come down with a sickness, and you pray and you pray and you pray. Well, God, why didn't you? Why didn't you? Why didn't you? And so all of a sudden now the character of God has changed. See, anybody can serve God when things are going good. Anybody can have faith when things are going good. Anybody can have faith when you got a job and when your kids are healthy and when your parents are healthy and when your family's going good. But when it's going not so good is when true faith hits its test. And in those moments, we have to remember that God is holy, that He has a bigger picture. And sometimes the answer to the prayer may not be what we're praying for, but there's a bigger picture around it. You see, my kids don't get everything they ask for. And sometimes, now my wife would argue that statement because I give them candy all the time. But I'll give you an example. In Texas, the state animal is a scorpion. And we have scorpions in our home all the time. You have to spray for scorpions. I walk in, and I've got my youngest son. He's holding a shoe, and it's got a scorpion about that big on it. And if you've ever been stung by a scorpion, has anybody ever been stung by a hornet? Worse. It hurts. And he's in there, he's like, Dad, look, it's a scorpion, and he's doing this. And all I'm thinking of is that thing is about to flip off that shoe and land on him, and it's going to pop him. And he's like, Dad, can we keep it? No, you can't. As a matter of fact, I knocked it off the shoe, and I smashed it in front of him. And he looked at me like I had just killed his pet. See, what my son didn't realize is there was a bigger picture. He saw this little animal. I saw a lot of pain. I saw a lot of hurt. I saw a lot of a very anxiety-filled day if he had gotten popped by that scorpion. The same as God. We don't always get what we ask for. And sometimes there's a bigger picture around the things that happen to us. I got cancer. And I sat there and I wondered over and over and over, and I blamed God. But honestly, I look back on it now and I go, God needed to slow me down. God needed to give me perspective. And sometimes the reason God allows things to happen is for a bigger picture that we can't even see, which leads me to my next sticky point. Stop fighting for control. We've got to get to a place where we stop fighting for control, because here's the deal. How many type A's do I have in here? You have a list. You have a to-do list, and if it don't get to-do'd, it sends you into oblivion. How many of you, raise your hand. See, some of y'all are like, type A, type A. We live in a world where it says, this is what should happen, and this is my list, and if it doesn't happen exactly the way I want it to, I get thrown off, and I'll sink into depression, or I get anxious about it. How many of you in here would say this, that I have an opinion, And if my opinion doesn't get accepted at work or get accepted even within my own family, that if my way, I feel like my way is the right way and the only way and the best way, and if it doesn't get done that way, I get upset about it, and I'm just ready to not even deal with it anymore because you're not going to listen to me anyway because there's only one way to do everything, right? Do I have any of those in here? Yeah, of course nobody's going to raise your hand. Some of y'all have bruised ribs right now, though, don't you? Here's what I know, is that if you knew God's plan, you'd quit. You really would. If you knew God's plan for your life, it would scare the junk out of you. And you would quit because His plan is so much bigger than anything we can ever begin to imagine. But see, here's the deal. He sees His plan. We see our circumstance. And the circumstance is just a small part of the plan. You see, control is actually one of the greatest illusions of humankind. You didn't control where you were born. You didn't control who your parents are. You could be the safest driver in the world, and on the way home, that little old lady that cut me off could run over a red light. It's true. We have no control. And we use these cliches that are like, hey, let go, let God. But how many of us actually let go of our situation and trust God? How many of us actually trust God with our kids? How many of us actually trust God with our marriage? How many of us actually are willing to trust God with our finances, trust God with our careers? Until we give our total trust to God, we're going to continue to live in a state of depression and anxiety. You see, trust is absolute faith. And giving up control means this, sticky note number 3, believe in His promise. Believe in His promise. Isaiah 41:10, do not be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God, and I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious hand. Do not be afraid. Whatever the world's going to throw at you, don't be afraid. I got you. That's a promise from God. Philippians 4:6-7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and by petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your heart and your minds in Christ Jesus. That verse did not say He will answer every single prayer the way you want to. But it did say, take your petition to God, and I'll guard your heart. Take your petition to God, and I'll give you peace through the storm. I'll give you peace through the circumstance. I'll give you peace in knowing that I'm not going to leave or forsake you. And here's what I know. God's presence is greater than your problem. God's presence is greater than your problem. He parted the sea. He created the world. He has shown Himself mighty over and over and over. And His church has withstood persecution. His name has withstood persecution. They tried to kill His Son, and it's still the glory of God shone through. God will never leave or forsake us. So when it comes to depression and anxiety, the biggest key to that is change your focus. Change your focus. Stop focusing on all of the negativity. Stop focusing on your circumstances and put your focus back on God. Slow down for a minute and focus on God. You see, the problem is when you run as fast as you can, you can't see what's on both sides of you. You've got blinders on because all you're looking at is some distant goal. And God says this. He said, hey, remember my promise. Remember that I'm mighty. Remember my promises. Take a minute. Take a breath. And focus on me. Take a minute. Take a breath. And focus on me. So often in life we focus on the negative. So often in life we focus on all the things that are going wrong. So often in life we start with all the things that are going to go wrong rather than starting with what God's going to do in the situation. It's true. So often in life, we'll look at our circumstances and all we see is all the reasons that are wrong. All we see is all the things that are coming against us. All we see are the things that are pressing down on us in life to the point where we can't take it anymore. God, if this is what you're going to do, just kill me now. I can't take it anymore. But God said, if you'll focus for just a minute, look at me. I've never left you. My character has never changed. I'm going to be with you through it all. Just focus. And remember, if you're sitting in here this morning, remember all the good things. Some of you need to start with your sticky notes and write down all the things that God has done amazing in your life. Some of you need to sit down and write down all the things God has brought you through. Because on a day when you're in a flat spin, you're going to need a reminder. You're going to need a reminder when God parted the sea for you. You're going to need a reminder when God showed up in a huge way when you asked Him. You're going to need a reminder that you have impact beyond what you just want to have impact with. We all need sticky notes because there will come a day, if you're not in it right now, there will come a day when you're going to be in a flat spin. And look, it just happens. And we're in a church that we're willing to walk with you through that. You're not going to be judged. You're not going to be ostracized. Here's what I know. Everybody in this room has been right where you're at this morning if you're in the flat spin today. Everybody's felt a little depressed. Everybody's had somebody not like them. Everybody's had the world crash around them. When we're in those moments, what are you focusing on? Are you focusing on your circumstance? Or are you focusing on your God? So often we focus on negative. Start looking back and focus on the positive. How many times have we actually hindered God's will and God's plan and God's direction? Because we're so focused on all of our stuff that we don't see His bigger picture. And He shows us every day. Look at what I brought you through. I didn't leave you then. I'm not going to leave you now. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, if the fire of life comes down and we feel like it's about to consume us, the God whom we serve is able. And here's why I know He's able. Because He brought us out before. He'll bring us out again. The God I serve is able. But even if He doesn't answer the way that I want Him to, I'm still going to choose to focus on Him. Because my trust and my control, I give to Him. That's faith. That's true faith. Not woohoo faith when it's going good. Even if He doesn't answer the way I need to. Even if the diagnosis. Even if my kid. Even if my job. Even if my plan doesn't work out. I'm going to focus and I'm going to trust. Because even if He doesn't, I know that He has, and I know that He will, and I'm going to believe in Him. Bow your head with me this morning. I want to pray for you in here this morning. If you're battling depression, if you're battling anxiety, if you're battling burnout, if you're battling frustration, I want to pray with you this morning. If you walked in here today and you would say, Pastor, I am weighed down. I'm tired of fighting. I'm sad. I'm angry. Pastor, there's been a diagnosis. I don't know how to deal with that. I've got a family problem. I don't know how to deal with that. I've got a thing going on in my marriage. I'm anxious. I don't know if my work's going to downsize. I don't know if I'll have a job when I graduate. I don't know if I'm going to pass this class. Whatever that is this morning, I want to pray for you. If you're in here this morning, you'd say there's an area of your life that you're battling depression or anxiety. I want you to open your hand right where you're at. God, this morning, you see the hands. I don't need to see the hands because I can't do anything for them. You can. Because life change only comes through you. True peace only comes through you. God, I pray that each and every person as they go out this week, if they're battling either one of these issues, that they'll focus on you, that they'll remember the good things. They'll remember the times when you brought them out of the last situation, and that, God, they'll focus on your promise that you'll continue. Your character never changes. Our circumstances do not dictate your character. And God, I pray that reminder is in front of everybody with their hand open. For those in here this morning that haven't committed to following you, God, I pray that you will speak to their hearts and that you will allow them to realize that the cycle of anxiety and the cycle of depression and the cycle of burnout stops with you. That God, that they will make a commitment to you this morning, right where they're at. That God, today is the day I choose you. Today is the day I begin to trust you with everything, with my life. Today I choose you. I may not know the answers. I may not know the direction. I may not know the verses. But I know today I choose you. God, for those in this room this morning, I pray that you speak to them. God, we're going to open up the altar. And there's going to be people that come up here and they're going to pray for their situations. God, your promise isn't that you'll necessarily answer the prayer that we have, but God, your promise is that you'll give us peace through the storms. God, I pray this morning, everybody with their hand open finds peace.